Good afternoon, Turks and Caicos Islands, and welcome to another edition of the the TCI Patriot Hour. And we are in the beginning stages of our Vote Your Voice voter education campaign. Today, I'm the host, Jamell Robinson, and the topic that we will be dealing with is why vote. Before I get any further, I'd like to send apologies for my two guests who are unable to make it today because of some last-minute obligations with their job. But the show must go on, and I have a couple of things up my sleeve. So, keep it locked. The number to call in, so it's just going to be me and you, public. The number to call in is 941-8550. That's 941-8550. So we're looking to have a great show. This is why vote. One of the good things that did happen is the guests were Mr. Kenyatta Rigby as well as Mr. Lekansy Missick. Mr. Missick actually sent in his answers to his questions, so we're going to go through that. We are also going to be looking at one of our TCI Patriots scribes, so to speak. He did a piece this last week in the newspaper called The Power of Your Vote, Mr. Jazz Walken. So I'm going to look at that after we have a commercial break. But let's get right into some of the questions that we had posed to in advance to our guests. And we all can look at some of the questions. And, you can call in at any time, 941-8550. So 941-8550. So what was the first question? Why should anyone vote? And Mr. Missick's response was, your vote is your voice. When you vote, you are actually telling elected officials and lawmakers how you feel about education, public safety, healthcare, and other important issues. Oftentimes, you voice our concerns to elected officials, but if you aren't voting, your concerns may not matter at all to them. Voting can actually give you the credibility to make your concerns a top priority for legislators. Me, I don't vote. I don't vote, therefore I don't have a voice. I don't have a voice, therefore there will be no conversation. There will be no conversation, therefore I don't get sold a dream. I don't get sold a dream, therefore I don't fantasize. I do not fantasize, therefore I live in reality. That was Mr. Missick's first response to the question, why should anyone vote? Now, as a voter myself, I definitely understand the sentiment that Mr. Missick expressed just there and talking about the voting, because we believe clearly this is a vote your voice, voter education drive. So we believe your vote is your voice, as reiterated by Mr. Missick. Now, what he does have some concern with, based on his response, is the fact that if you're not voting, you're not going to be nobody worrying about you. That's what he says, because you're not being a part of the process to select our elected officials to make change happen in this country. And make things go for the better depending on who you vote for. Now, what I would say, and it's an interesting discussion because one of the other hosts on another show actually has an opposite view in terms of whether or not you vote, you still have a stake based on the Constitution, because the Constitution affords you a certain amount of rights as a citizen of the country. So regardless, and that host believes, regardless of if you actually participate in the voting process, you should be able to have some say in the governance of your country. Now, my preference is that persons clearly get out and vote and express themselves. Now, my also preference would be that they exercise good judgment in their voting patterns. You know what I mean? So they have various things to take a look at. But definitely, being a part of the Vote Your Voice voter education campaign, as well as a member of the TCI Patriots, for us, voting is extremely important because, it's your democratic right as a citizen of the Turks and Caicos Islands that you go out to the polls when elections happen to be called. You vote. And that's why we would have started out from last year with the voter registration drive. And this is just a continuation because we said, okay, well, and this was even before we were the TCI Patriots, because we said, okay, well, we've assisted persons with arming them with information on the voter registration process. Now that these persons have registered, okay, now we have a responsibility that these same persons we would have helped to register don't just go to the polls without being armed with information on how they should be selecting their candidates. You know what I mean? So this is a part of the reason why we have launched the Vote Your Voice voter education campaign, because this is part 2 of what we originally started as part 1. So that's that. So on to the next question. Since we don't have a caller, but you can call in at any time. Again, 941-8550. The second question was posed to Mr. Missick and our other guest was, does voting ensure that the electorate get the government they want? And his response to that was, you all are on different sides of the fence. So it's impossible for the electorate to get the government they want. You have 3 parties vying for the government, and they all have their supporters. I'm sure that the supporters of each party want them to win the government, but only one of the 3 will prevail. So you have supporters of 2 parties that didn't get the government they wanted. Now that's very interesting because, and this comes down to the concept of governance after a government is selected. Because what Mr. Missick is speaking to essentially is saying that, okay, well, you got all these Turks Islanders vying for a seat in the House of Assembly. After a government is formed, and historically it's been via parties, after that government is formed, it's almost like he's saying, and what we've witnessed in our history, what happens is, okay, well, that particular government focuses a majority on their supporters, or their supporters. So while you would want, after the fact, whatever vision the parties or persons running would have stated before, should cover the whole of the Turks and Caicos Islands and the whole, and every Turks and Caicos Islander. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case over our last 40 years of ministerial government. So what he's speaking to is almost impossible. What he's saying, that the electorate would be essentially getting the electorate they want. But the case is that whomever forms the next government of this country, what it should be is a case where you have the vision of that particular group of people being such that it's inclusive of any and all Turks and Caicos Islanders, regardless of the political affiliation persons would have had. Yes, you're going to go to the polls, and yes, campaign season is going to be kicking into high gear and all of that stuff. That's going to happen, and each side is going to want to see their persons represented. But after the polls are closed and the votes are tallied, it has to be a case where each and every Turks and Caicos Islander has opportunity based on the governance of the country. That should be the resulting factor. So hopefully one day, what Mr. Missick describes here, which is the current reality, will be different, because we can't continue to have situations where only a portion of the society is looked after a government is elected, because that means persons might be, quote unquote, struggling for now and waiting for their government or their preferred party or their preferred legislative members to become the government of the day, so they can feel like they're benefiting, when indeed all we're doing as a part of making an election happen is selecting the persons who we want to govern for our up to 4 years after that particular election cycle, rather than, okay, well, I put you there specifically so you can help me do X, Y, Z. That's why knowing the vision of persons who are vying for elected office and for a seat as a member of parliament and for to be represented is very important for you to know as a part of your voting makeup, because at the end of the day, that person is going there to represent you. And even if you vote for another person and your person doesn't get in, the person who is in the either all island or on the constituency level, they still have a responsibility to the constituency, because there's no such thing as a PDM MP in the Constitution. There's no such thing as a PNP MP in the Constitution. There's no such thing as those members in the House. And if you listen to when the Speaker of the House speaks, or even when members are addressing each other, they don't say, well, the PDM member, the PNP member. They specifically say the member for Grand Trunk South and Salt Key, the third island, a large seat was the third All Island member, the first All Island member, the member from Middle Caicos and North Caicos. You know what I mean? Those are the references. So there's no reference of party affiliation inside the House, even though you have a government and an opposition that's constituted as a part of it. But those are just the things that kind of come out of it. I think we have our first caller. Caller, you on the air?
Hey, Mr. Robinson, hi again.
How you doing?
Pretty well, thanks. It's an interesting conversation as always. And I would just like to share these 2 things, or 2 or 3, with regards to why vote, right?
All right.
When I heard you talk about that, there's a portion of scripture that said, don't partake in another man's sin, right? And that is very interesting. Yesterday, in fact, I told your father on Monday of this week that I told one of my sisters that when election come around, Lord's willing, I'm gonna leave this country, because it useless, right? Voting for people, going to the poll and vote for people who ain't gonna represent people, who ain't gonna do what they say they're gonna do, all right? And both sides are guilty of that. And yesterday I had someone called me and we had an interesting conversation, and I told them that some of the regulations that this government coming up with now that really ain't helpful to certain persons who want to do certain businesses, right? Because of the requirement. And they start saying how wicked it is, right? That's wickedness. And I laugh, and they say, don't laugh, right? And so he told me to don't vote, right? And he said he's going to encourage his people and all his family, to don't vote and what have you. Listen, I'm not ashamed to say this, right? I voted for the premier, right? And on the account of his father and the work and himself too, and for the Honorable Washington Missick and for your dad and a couple of other guys who wasn't successful at the poll, right? And for some of the PDMs, right?
Right.
So, and I'm not ashamed to say I voted for those guys, right? But it really hurts my heart to see that they're not really doing as much as they could have done for people that really in this country that really need help. And that's why when I heard people say things about how people in this country are suffering, I wonder how true it is, because for that to be so and to see those guys doing nothing about it, it's painful. And to go to the poll and vote for those guys again, man, it's hogwash. I mean, it's terrible. And finally, I remember years ago, I went to the airport and this person, this is a very prominent business person, and they said to me, said, Johnny, are you shelling or are you belling, right? And I said, none of the above. That was the year when a number of independent candidates was running, right? When Clifford and Jay and those guys. I said, none of the above. So I even felt, he didn't stop to think, you're voting independent or whatever. He just said, well, if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. Like the late John C. Gardner would say, far be it hard. People must not let politicians and supporters of particular parties tell them that nonsense that if they do not vote, they do not have a voice. Because if you vote for a wicked government, okay, you partaking in the actions of that wicked government. If you vote for a righteous government, you partaking in righteous work. And it's important for people to get educated in which direction to go, right? And even when some of them know the direction to go, right, they still don't go because they just cannot go that way because they don't want to forgive, all right, and they don't want to go the way they go. I mean, and if you know anything about the scripture, remember when the rich guy came to Jesus and asked him, "What must he do to have eternal life?" And then Jesus answered him how sorrowful he went away.
Yep.
Right. So let's not be biased in educating our people. Okay, they have a right to vote. They have a right to don't vote. And I understand like 20%. Okay, or the born again Americans, they are not voting because for none of those candidates we have a right. We have a God-given right to vote, and just how the Her Majesty government have a God-given responsibility, right, to deliver the oppressed and the afflicted. That's another option we have. Thanks, man, and bye.
All right, have a good day, caller. All I would add to what you're saying, I don't believe is useless in terms of no representation for the people, because at the end of the day, all of our 15 elected members and persons who might be appointed members and who are seeking to be running next go around, they all have to give an account of their stewardship. So you have to look at that objectively. And one of the topics we're going to be looking at later down the line is candidate profiles, because that outlines basically how do you select a candidate, because the tools we have available for us is limited in terms of what persons use to select their particular representative, because at the end of the day, whom much is given, much is required. But I also add on, I've added this on recently, whom little is given, even more is required, because as you're talking about the Bible, there's the parable about the three servants. One was given five talents, one was given 2 talents, and one was given 1 talent. Now the one with 5 and 2, the one who had the 2 who had 5 and 2 talents, they went out and they doubled it. And the one who had 1 talent, they went and they buried it. And when the master came back home and asked the guy who buried it, they said, "Oh, master, I know you was a tough man, so I didn't want to lose nothing." So what he did was take their 1 talent and gave it to the one that had 10 talents now, because at the end of the day, everybody is accountable for their stewardship. So what we have to demand as an electorate is demand better candidates, better options, and that's across the board. However you want, however they come up with, whoever they come up with, whether it be PDM, PNP, PDA, the unknown parties that might be brewing out there, who knows, independents, whatever. Look at a man for what they've done and what they intend to do. You have to get inside their head before they get into parliament. You can't wait till after a person get in parliament to figure out what their views are on immigration and labor, what their views are on the economy, what their views are on education, what their views are on youth. And not only you need their views, you need their solutions, because everybody in this country knows the problems we have. We are living them. That's fine. We get that. We know that. But what is the solution, and is it actionable? Can I buy into the solution you want? Because your solution mightn't be the best. And if we open a dialogue between the potential candidates and the actual electorate on a consistent basis, we'd actually get solutions. And it doesn't have to be, okay, well, I can't offer a solution because my party ain't in power. That don't make sense. I have to suffer for 3 or 4 years for you to go in, for you to ease the suffering, when I could have just got what would have been an easy fix. Now it's going to take even more. Even if you think about how government buildings have got run down over the years, and I'm talking about long years, because we have an issue where we don't usually program maintenance inside of buildings. So we create a building, beautiful, lovely, new, spanking new, then 10 years later it's run to the ground, rather than us adding a maintenance portion which will keep it and have the longevity of that particular building for donkey years, so to speak. And it'll cost a lot less than, okay, well, now we almost have to basically rebuild a whole new building because we didn't take the small bits of money to keep it up over the years. I think we have another caller coming through. So, caller, you on there?
Good afternoon, Mr. Robinson. How you doing today?
I'm doing okay. Who's this calling?
Don't worry about who's calling. Take call no name, take no blame.
Yes, sir.
But this is a very interesting conversation, and the caller before, he made some very valid points, but I didn't agree with everything he said. You know, as a citizen, I believe in exercising my democratic right to the polls, and I'll tell you why. I have spoken to a number of church and chicken pastors over the years, and they express their concern and their disheartenment, whether it's frustration, whether it's contentment. But one thing I know, not going to the poll is not going to give you any satisfaction, because if not voting would make you feel better about not contributing to the situation, I can understand. But how many church and chicken pastors do you believe, if they decide not to vote, will care less about church and chicken when they see the government that they didn't vote for come to power and do and continue contrary to what their hearts desire? And that's why I say, at the end of the day, if you are a real patriot or you're a real citizen who loves your country, you are going to want to be a part of the process. You are going to want to do what is in your power to give yourself the best chance to succeed. What does that mean? We talk about knowing what to vote for and examining the people that come to us. At the end of the day, the power is in our hands. I look at history. I love history, as you know. One of the things I learned is that whenever a people desire change, or whenever a people desire a change in direction, they do two things. One, they look at the situation at hand, and two, they decide the steps that are necessary to make an adjustment. And one of the engines of change is politics. It's unfortunate sometimes because too many things is political when it shouldn't be. But one of the engine of change, or one of the engines that drive change in most countries, is politics. So when you look at where you want your country to go, you have to make a decision. You look at what the politicians are saying to you, and you look at where you want your country to be. If their desires for our country does not line up with your desires, then you've got to ask yourself the question, how do I get my desires, or how do I get these people to see what I want in my country? At the end of the day, as I said before, we have the power. We are the ones that put leaders to power. We are the ones that take them out of power. Throughout the history of the world, I always point to the United States. They had a system that was working from 1600 to 1776. When the King of England refused to listen to the cries of the American people in the local legislatures there, the United 13 colonies said to themselves, you know something? This system of government is not working. Now, I'm not championing independence, but I'm just showing you the example of where a set of people recognize that the tools they have is not building the kind of house they want. So what they had to do? They had to go back to the drawing board and
Have
draft
some
a
new
new plan.
tools.
So they said, listen, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and that they were endowed with certain irreversible rights, that among them are the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And so at the end of the day, they said, knowing these freedoms, whenever a people have elected or chosen a government that no longer represents their interests, or elected and chosen representatives that no longer represent their interests, it is their will and it is their power to address it, either by removing them out of office or changing the system that got them into office. Because at the end of the day, the will of the people must be expressed. That is the whole purpose of democracy. And the final thing I want to say, I am not going to support, or I'm not going to encourage any church in Islander not to be involved in the democratic process. Because at the end of the day, we bear the two responsibilities. We either bear the responsibility to offer ourselves as a better solution to what we have now, or we bear the responsibility to remove persons who we see are not lining up with what we want done. So that's the choice. But not partaking is not an option, because this is the same country we're going to be dealing with. When those persons come to power, I always see people say, oh, I ain't like that government. That's not the point. It's still your government. It's at the end of the day, our goal must be for the country to succeed. And failure is not an option. And if we go to the polls with that attitude, that failure is not an option, and that we're voting for character rather than just political rhetoric, I'm quite sure the results will be different. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, caller. It's a mouthful, so we're gonna. I'll endorse some of that. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do another question, and then I'm gonna take a quick commercial break after I just read this response to this question from Mr. Lekansy Missick, who's helped us out with some great information, and If you missed some of it, if we don't get to all the questions today on this one particular show, we're going to be posting these questions and answers on our website, the TCIPatriots.blogspot.com. That's TCIPatriots.blogspot.com. So the third question that we asked was, do you believe that electing a government is the best way to get one? So Mr. Missick's response was, that's a hard question to answer. Yes, the people have a right to decide who they want to represent them, but at the same time, we have persons making uninformed decisions. They go to the poll and vote for a candidate because their parent told them to, or because they are a relative of the candidate. And considering that we are a small nation, I'm pretty sure we have a lot of things going on. Me personally, I sometimes wonder what's the selection criteria, and that's what that's the end of his response, and that kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of, okay, how do we evaluate the persons that are asking us to represent us for the next 4 years? And that's why one of the things we're definitely doing is the candidate profile. We have this nice candidate report card that was put together by CaribbeanElections.org that we're going to be using, and we're going to modify it so it can be Turks Islander friendly, so it covers our particular issues. But the reason we want that is to have that available for persons who wish to use it, to be able to have at least a guide on how picking your candidates. You look, you go through it, and you basically score them. You give them a scorecard, a report card. You score them on their views on stuff. So where you don't know their views on things, reach out to them and ask them, because at the end of the day, you have to make what we want as a part of this voter education campaign is to have informed voters at the end of the day. You pick your candidates how you choose, but we prefer having persons informed on making their choice, because at the end of the day, your vote is very powerful. And when we come back after this quick commercial break, before we continue with more questions and what Mr. Missick would have responded to, we're going to touch into the power of your vote that was written by Jazz Walken. So I'm going to read that article once we come back from this quick commercial break. Calling all Patriots. It's that time of year again. Applications for the Turks and Caicos National Awards are being accepted. Don't miss out on an opportunity to nominate and honor your fellow Turks and Caicos Islanders. The categories are as follows: the Order of National Hero, the Order of the Turks and Caicos Islands, the Meritorious Service Medal, the Long Service Medal, the National Young Achievers Medal, and our personal favorite, the Patriotic Award. The deadline for all submissions is June 30th, 2016. For a copy of the National Medals and Awards Guidelines, email us at tcipatriots@gmail.com. That's tcipatriots@gmail.com. We will make our submissions, so make sure you make yours. Vote your voice!
Ole Peter the fire, ole Peter the fire, ole Peter the fire, ole Peter the fire.
The Vote Your Voice voter education campaign takes over the Patriot Hour. During the months of May, June, and July, we will discuss hot topics like: do elections matter? The election process, candidate profiles, the role of media in politics, integrity in public life, and much, much more. That's every Thursday, 1 p.m., 2 p.m. on Tropical Vibes 105.5 FM or www.ustream.tv/channel/Vibes105 FM. Get ready to vote your voice and exercise your franchise.
Election time is in pretty too. Election nobody switch their phone. Ole Peter the fire, ole Peter the fire, ole Peter the fire.
Welcome back to the Patriot Hour. We are doing the Vote Your Voice Voter Education Campaign, and the topic today is why vote. So far, we've had a few callers calling in, which was great so far. We've been discussing some of the questions, and again, I would like to apologize for our guests, Mr. Lekansy Missick and Mr. Kenyatta Rigby, who weren't able to be in here because of constraints due to work, last minute stuff that came up. But we're going through the responses that Mr. Lekansy Missick would have provided to the questions that we posed. So we're going through some of that, as well as right now I'm going to read through one of the latest articles that we would have put out by the Vote Your Voice Voter Education Campaign. This one is called The Power of Your Vote, and it's written by Mr. Jazz Walken, who's people are very familiar with him across this Turks and Caicos Islands. So I will read it, and if we have any callers during that, after that particular time who want to discuss it, we can do that, or we can continue with our questions and responses from Mr. Lekansy Missick. So, the power of your vote. One of the core principles of Western democracy is the right of citizens to exercise the universal suffrage and establish governments to run their respective countries. The concept of universal suffrage requires the right to vote to be granted to all citizens of a country. Historically, many so-called democracies only extended this right to men who own property, thus limiting the power of the masses to direct the affairs of their country. For years, the concept of majority rule had been corrupted by the minority ruling because they continued to set conditions which alienated the poor and lower classes of society from a right to participate in the democratic process. Thankfully, the beauty of democracy is that it always evolves, especially with the influence of education and the growth of a working middle class. Hence, universal adult suffrage eventually meant that all men and women of voting age were given the right to vote. What does the right to vote mean? Your right to vote is one of the most powerful tools given to man and woman because it represents the most powerful tool given to us by our Creator, the power of free will. The ability to choose our leaders is powerful because while many elected people have become drunk with power throughout history, in a democracy such as ours, citizens have the power to humble that leader or remove him or her from power in the same manner the power was given, i.e., through your vote. So that begs the question, who really has the power in a democracy? Is it the people who are elected or the electors themselves? Can our elected officials rule without our vote? Beside the ridiculous provision for appointed members of the House, can the members of Parliament sit in the People's Honorable House of Assembly without your vote? Can they act as ambassadors for this country and be given responsibilities over portfolios and ministries if we do not send them to work on our behalf? The answer is no. So I ask the question again, who really has the power in this democracy? For too long, we have been misled to believe that we work for elected officials and not the other way around. We have taken the power of our vote for granted, and we have often given it to individuals who should not be trusted with such power. Before Peter Parker became Spider-Man, his granduncle told him, "With great power come great responsibilities." This could not be truer for belongers today because each of us are once more in possession of 6 votes. My friends, 6 votes are a lot of power, so let us use it responsibly. Let me say that one more time. My friends, 6 votes are a lot of power, so let us use it responsibly. For these reasons, the Patriots have embarked on a journey to remind you and make you fully aware of the power of your vote. From the voter registration drive last November, we realized that we have to encourage new eligible voters to vote your voice, and now we will not let our people go to the polls once more without fully understanding the magnitude of their power, without fully understanding the magnitude of the power their vote has. Your vote is sacred. It is personal. It is your Excalibur to King Arthur's kingdom. Your vote is an expression of your heart's desire for your country. It is an expression of your hope for TCI. It is your expression of your frustration and decision you now make to address it. Remember, most countries, a single ballot means a single vote. For us, we have 6 votes, and 6 votes are a lot of power. So let us use it responsibly. I'll say that last line one more time. For us, we have 6 votes, and 6 votes are a lot of power. So let us use it responsibly. That was an article that was written by Mr. Jazz Walken. I'm familiar to many people across this TCI, called The Power of Your Vote. And my name is Jamell Robinson, and I endorse that message. So if you want to call to make a comment about what I just read, you can call in on 946-8550. That's 946-8550. That article was called The Power of Your Vote. (941-8550). Sorry if I made a mistake. So it's 941-8550. Yes, so 941-8550. So on to more questions that we would have asked Mr. Lekansy, Missick. I have to make sure I call the name because we have a lot of Missicks in this country, just in case you're just tuning in. Mr. Lekansy Missick would have sent in some responses to the questions because he couldn't make it today, unfortunately, but great responses so far. So next question was, most young persons that we've spoken to in the last few months say they aren't voting. Why do you think this is? Mr. Lekansy Missick's response was, most young persons are uninformed of what is going on. So to them, it doesn't really bother them who wins the election. They're thinking nothing will change for them. They wake up the next day, go to work for those who have jobs, and the cycle continues. Then you have those who want to vote, but don't know why they should, and no one is making any effort to reach these individuals. They don't have to go out and hunt these candidates down. It should be the other way around. And this is where Mr. Missick, essentially, Mr. Lekansy Missick is talking about persons who vote need information on who they're voting for. Now, if you want my vote, at some point I should be in a position to either speak with you on a one-to-one, because again, we only got like what, 7,000 voters, a little over 7,000 voters, or 7,500 voters in the TCI. If an election is called, there's at least 35 days when an election takes place. So within that time, if you break it down, particularly at the constituency level, where some constituencies maybe have 900 on the high end, 400 or 500 on the low end. You got 35 days to reach everybody at a minimum, and that's of course if you're not campaigning ahead of the date of the election, which we can clearly see is going on with the various rallies from the two of the three political parties, and whatever persons are doing in their private times in terms of their campaigning. So we're not a big country. You can take the time to either come see me personally, or you can take the time to just give me a call. Persons can reach anybody. This is the media technology, social media. Find a way to get your message to the person directly so they can have an informed decision, versus just, okay, well, you're with Party X. I support Party X generally, so I'm going to support you and give you a vote. That might not be enough. So persons might feel as the previous caller some time ago, Ms. Gardner who would have said persons don't want to partake in the creation of a good or a bad government because they don't know. So you have somebody who is minimally informed, but they don't know enough of what is going on. So next question. That's my little add-on to that. So next question would have been, do you believe that this government has focused on the issues that are important to the people. And Mr. Lekansy response was, I plead the fifth. And so he take a slide to the side door on that one. He didn't want to respond to that, which I fully understand given his position within TCI. So you can't get too political or political at all when you're dealing with government, because you can put yourself in a very peculiar spot. But definitely we understand where that comes from. So again, when it comes to issues and importance, well, you have to know what issues are important to you, and you can assess as a voter what personally you believe they've done, the government has done, what they haven't done. And this portion extends to the whole of the governance mechanism, because we have all these institutions for good governance. So you have the government cabinet, the House of Assembly, so that's the whole 15 members as they debate legislation, as they talk about and bring motions and bills and ask questions on behalf of us as good as they do amendments in the committee of the whole, if I'm not mistaken. So a lot of people will be judged on their record, and persons who don't have at least parliamentary records, well, you judge them other ways. So, okay, well, you might be a first-time person vying for, or not even first time, several times, but you're vying for a seat in the House of Parliament. So what else can I judge you on to get a good feel for whether or not you can represent me in the House? So we would have to find other ways to kind of scale up, given that we don't have a local government, so to speak, a local government mechanism by election. So we have to take other things to use to judge how persons have performed, and will that translate once they get elected. Next question. In 1976, three of the main issues were more powerful local government, youth unemployment, and less reliance on expatriate workers. In 2016, these three problems still remain. We've educated more citizens and obviously made them more able to work and provide for themselves and their families. But have we actually changed anything in relation to the structure of society? Mr. Lekansy Missick's response was, well, I wasn't around in 1976, nor was I. So I don't know what the structure was like. But if you look around, I'm sure the importation of labor is evident. And as it relates to educating citizens, I have friends with university degrees on the beach in Grand Turk and Provo hustling because they can't get a job in their respective fields. Guys who went to school on government-funded scholarships but still were unsuccessful in obtaining government jobs have to watch labor being imported day after day to fill the same holes that they are qualified for. And you mentioned more power for local government. How much power do you really want your local government to have? Well, that ends a question with another question. But to some of the things Mr. Lekansy Missick would have highlighted is that essentially I believe he agrees that the three things are still the case. You know what I mean? Even though we've moved forward in terms of more educated people, the belief is that there's still work to do in terms of creating the opportunities within the labor market so persons who have qualified themselves with the assistance of governments over the years has an opportunity to work. You know what I mean? Like some time ago, I would have written a article / proposal, I could say, where it looks at creating a sustainable middle class. And a part of that solution that I proposed was the fact that we could easily set up a program such that within 3 to 5 years we can have a significant number of Turks and Caicos Islanders in middle management positions within the TCI, because at the end of the day, we have an economy that needs thousands and thousands of people. We are not having babies at the rate we would need to have them to fill out all the jobs that we need. So there's going to be a need for labor. So my argument has always been, okay, well, if there's 10,000 Turks Islanders that needs employment and there's 5,000 middle to upper management jobs, yeah, but 90% of that or more should be Turks Islanders. So why we don't need to have all our middle management and upper management to be non-Turks and Caicos Islanders? We've definitely gotten to the point where the amount of educated persons, so it's just about creating the opportunity where it's essentially mandated that you get an opportunity, and you can do that very easily through immigration and labor policy. You don't even have to do legislation, because the legislation as is allows for the government of the day to dictate how persons are hired, how long they can stay here, what their requirements are in terms of understudying and all that stuff. And the same thing can be said for TCIG, where, okay, well, not only does it have to happen in the private sector, you have to do it in the public sector, because at the end of the day, what I've always said is, if I'm understudying John Doe to take over their job, and John Doe after 3 years or 2 years says, well, Jamell Robinson isn't ready for the post now, John Doe's supposed to be fired, because a part of the requirement would have been to get me ready. And at the very least, there needs to be more follow-up. So it's a case where persons know ahead of time whether or not they're being ready, and you should have multiple options, because at the end of the day, you want persons to be in the middle management, because then you're in a position where you can basically do more in society. Caller, you on the air.
Yes, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
Just wanted to know, listen, if you look at life and look at us and look at everybody and everybody looking at everybody, and everybody needs to look at everybody right now, because nobody is nowhere where somebody should be. The only way you could be what you really want to be is through Jesus Christ, who strengthens us. I reached to the point to see, when you listening to the radio Turks and Caicos and they're having their alleged meetings, sometimes I think about Fred and Bonnie, French Loon. You know the French Loon?
Yes, I do.
Come on, man. You're international. You're doing international stuff. You're trying to build a country. You look at both sides. You can count the few who really meant about hitting the points that need to be looked at in this country. And every time you pull a point, there's a problem. You won't talk about vote for people? Listen, there's 3 parties in here now. And believe it, people are sitting back and they're going to all of these meetings. No matter what, they're going to them. But when the day comes, we all going to be surprised. Because, listen, justice is needed in this country. Thank you very much. Ben T. Tyrone Rigby, Turks and Caicos Starman. Thank you.
Thank you, caller, for sharing your views. And, yep, again, I definitely believe in the power of each and everyone's individual to vote. And I would definitely encourage persons to, go hear all sides, because at the end of the day, all, regardless of which party or entity or person you may be supporting, all ideas that are of sound or that has value or that are sound in its thinking can be used. Because at the end of the day, if Party X says this is a way to fix our youth problem, our unemployment problem, but Party Y gets into power, that doesn't mean Party Y can't say, you know what, that was a great idea Party X put together. I'm going to use that. It's a little bit better than the idea I have, because at the end of the day, it's about the resulting and the improvement of the people of the Turks and Caicos Islands, regardless of where the idea would have been generated. Because to know somebody has an idea that can't be implemented because they're not in power, to me, is just nonsense. If you have the ideas, share it, because we have enough problems, and there are going to be new problems that we haven't even encountered yet but we're still fighting up with problems that we had since 76, which makes no sense. 40 years later, we're still fighting up with the same kind of things, man. At what point are we going to have a proper handle on some of the issues that we have in the TCI so we can move forward and deal with the bigger issues, you know what I mean, or more complex issues? Let's just put policies in place, let it marinate, let it do what it has to do, let it be enforced, let it be implemented, and let's knock those out and move on. You know what I mean? And again, at the end of the day, if we're all with a similar vision of where the end point is, how you get there matters not, as long as you get to the end result. Because me taking 2 hops and a jump gets me to the same place the same way if I take a jump and 2 hops, because it's the same amount. We might be in different order, but it's the same thing, you know. Because at the end of the day, what I believe in what the people of the TCI can do and what they will do. You know what I mean? I think there's already a smarter electorate just by virtue of our availability and our opportunities that we would have had over the years to access tertiary education, access training, access more, being more attentive, coming of age. Because I'm positive when I voted the first time in 2003 and when I voted in 2012, my caliber of voting was a lot different in terms of my awareness of my surroundings. You know what I mean? Same thing with 2007, you know. So it's different. My way of thinking and approaching voting is different than a lot of persons. I believe they're looking at various things as to what and why they would end up voting. So let me try to get 1 or 2 more questions in before before they kick me off the radio. So another question was, do you believe our politicians take their job seriously, or are they pulling a fast one on voters after the elections? Mr. Lekansy Missick's response was, politicians do what politicians do. So that's straightforward. Next question was, would you vote for someone just because they're a candidate for the party you support, or maybe a relative of yours, even though you knew they wouldn't be a good representative of the people? His response was emphatically, Mr. Lekansy Missick, I would not. And another question was, would you sell your vote for the right price? Emphatically again, no, I would not. And the last question before we slide off air was, lastly, how important do you believe is this upcoming general election for the future of the TCI? Mr. Lekansy Missick's response was, the future is only 4 years. One party can win this election and another party can win the next. That changes the future for 4 years, for the 4 years to follow. But if you are making reference to independence, that's a different conversation altogether. Definitely, that is a whole nother conversation. But our time is up. You have been listening to me, Jamell Robinson, the host for today of the TCI Patriot Hour. We're doing the Vote Your Voice voter education campaign. I hope you learned something extra and have a lot of things to ponder as we continue on. And next week, our topic will be branches of government, and we have the Honorable Deputy Governor who will be in the building, as well as the Speaker of the House, Mr. Honorable Robert Hall, and the Honorable Deputy Governor, Honorable Anya Williams, Her Excellency Anya Williams. So it's going to be great, and, just continue with the information sharing, because at the end of this 3-month process, we want to have voters armed and ready to go to the polls and vote your voice. So with that, have a great afternoon, and thank you very much for listening in. And you can follow us on TCI patriotsblogspot.com, where we keep on dropping our information. If you missed some of the show today, you can go on that website over the weekend. We would have this video posted from today. But have a great evening and have a great weekend. Thank you.